Hey kids, it's Miss Patty. I just want to let you know that we're praying for you and miss you. And this week we'll be reading the Willow Valley Kids, The Animal Shelter, Chapter 2. And it starts with, it wasn't until Thursday afternoon that the Willow Valley Kids were able to make the trip out past the farm to the animal shelter. Sergeant Riley was able to get time off of work at the police station, and he offered to drive them in their van. I might stop in and see my parents while we're out there, he told them as they climbed into the minivan. This time the trip out to the farm was much quicker since the snow was gone, but to Emily it seemed to take twice as long. On one hand, she was terribly excited at the possibility of finding her Cinderella, but she was also afraid of finding her cat. Would Cinderella be hungry and scared like the puppy was? It's just a couple more miles, Sergeant Riley told them as they passed the gravel road that led to the farm. 5 minutes later, they saw the homemade wooden sign on the side of the road. Mitchell's was the faded paint said, with a crooked arrow pointing to the right. Sergeant Riley slowly turned onto the narrow dirt track. After winding through some trees and around a large field, they approached an old house. Behind the house were several run-down sheds and buildings. This place gives me the creeps, said Heidi as they climbed out of the van. Two thin dogs were tied with ropes to the porch railing. They strained at their collars and barked fiercely at the visitors. An old woman opened the front door of the house and came out on the porch. "Hush up, dogs," she hollered. The dogs whimpered and backed away from her as she shuffled down the path toward the gate in the chain-link fence that surrounded the yard. "You got business here?" she asked, squinting at them in the sunlight. "Afternoon, ma'am," said Sergeant Riley, stepping back. "We're here to look at some lost animals. We were wondering if we could take a look around." "This place ain't open to the public, you know," the woman said. "My son Al runs this place. I'll get him to come out here and talk to y'all." With that, the woman went back into the house, and they could hear her yelling inside. "All folks hear about some lost animals. Get out there and talk to them." A moment later, the door opened again, and a man wearing a faded plaid shirt and dirty jeans came out to see them. He put on a smile as he came out and opened the gate. "Howdy there, folks. What can I do for you today?" "This young lady has lost her cat," said Sergeant Riley, nodding toward Emily. "We were hoping that we could look at the animals you've got here to see if you might have her cat." "I see," said Al. "I do have a few cats here. What did you say your cat looks like?" "She's white with black patches." Emily hated the scared wobble she heard in her voice. "Don't think we've got any cats like that," said Al. "We don't take stray animals here, just the ones we get from the dealers. We breed animals for a research lab. That's all." Chills ran down Emily's spine. "Research lab?" she shakingly asked. "Don't worry, Missy. It's done all the time, don't you know? Medical companies got to find out what their medicines'll do, and they can't use people, can they?" Al laughed loudly. "Well, it wouldn't hurt for us to take a look, would it?" asked Sergeant Riley. "I don't know," said Al, scratching his head. "I don't like to disturb the animals by bringing strangers in. It gets 'em all stirred up." He looked at Emily. "Maybe, if you just went quiet-like into the place where they keep the cats, It should be okay. I can be as quiet as she can. Oh, I can be as quiet as she can, said Sergeant Riley in his policeman's voice. Show us where the cats are. Yes, sir, said Al, coming out of the gate. It's over here. Just follow me. The rest of you stay in the van. Sergeant Riley told the others, Emily and I will be back shortly. Emily's heart thudded as she followed the two men across the muddy stretch of ground toward one of the buildings. What would they find? The sagging wood door creaked as Al pulled it back to make an entrance. You can go on in, he told them gruffly. Just don't get too close to the cages. Some of them cats are mean. Emily stood in the doorway until her eyes got used to the dark shadows inside. The building was about the size of a garage, and the walls were lined with cages. Nearly half of the cages were empty. In the other cages, sleepy heads lifted and round eyes blinked at Emily. A scattering of pitiful meows broke the silence of the dark room. Emily started next to the door and began to glance into the cages one by one as Sergeant Riley stood comfortingly in the center of the room. Emily didn't look too closely. She didn't want to see the unhappiness of each cat. She was only looking for one, her own Cinderella. Emily turned two corners of the room before she stopped and stood absolutely still. Sergeant Riley came to stand next to her. Did you find her? He asked quietly. Emily didn't need to answer. Cinderella was there, meowing and rubbing her head desperately against the wire of her cage. Emily reached for the door of the cage, but a padlock stopped her from opening it. We found my cat, she called to Al excitedly. Can you come and let her out? Al came in and stood next to her. You think that's your cat? How do you know? Just look at her, said Emily. She knows me. Don't you hear her purring? Al shook his head. Don't know how we could have gotten her. If she was yours, you know, she's worth $100 to me. If you want her, you'll have to pay. What? Emily exclaimed. That is my cat. Sorry, said Al. If you want her, you'll have to buy her. $100, like I said. Sergeant Riley took Emily by the elbow and led her out of the building. Give us a minute to talk about it, he said to Mr. Mitchell. I can't believe he's making me pay for my own cat, said Emily angrily. $100? He's out of his mind. I know this is frustrating, but there's not much you can do about it right now. But it's wrong, Emily exclaimed. Can't you arrest him or something? You saw how thin and dirty Cinderella is. Listen to me, Sergeant Riley told her. This guy may be breaking the law, but we have no evidence of it right now. You just have to be patient on this. I know it's tough, Emily, but there's nothing we can do today. Emily shook her head, fighting against the tears that stung her eyes. I don't want to leave Cinderella here, she whispered. Sergeant Riley put a hand on her shoulder. The Bible says God cares about sparrows, he said. That must mean he cares about cats, too. Now, we're going to have to leave Cinderella here, at least until you can work out how to pay for her. After a moment, Emily nodded. She knew Sergeant Riley was right. Lifting her chin, she turned and walked back over to Al Mitchell. "That is my cat, and he was stolen from me," she told him, looking him straight in the eyes. "I'm coming back in a week to get her. Will you promise me she'll be here when I come?" Al shrugged. "None of these animals are going nowhere, Missy. We don't deliver 'em until the 1st of June. "You'll take care of her, won't you?" Emily persisted. "You'll feed her and make sure she's okay?" "She'll get the same treatment all the rest of 'em get," the man told her. "That's what I'm afraid of," said Emily under her breath as she walked back to the van. It was going to be a long week.